Bienvenido a What's Left. Welcome. Want to do the entire thing in Spanish. Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with Andy Lipson, and today's topic will be the Amazon forest fires. Amazon fires.
This is our second episode about fires.
Yes, it's only time. It's only I think appropriate because it's in the news, and it's not just because it's we'll get into reasons why I feel like this shouldn't be a new headline issue. It should be an ongoing issue, but we'll get there. So I think the main reason why this is in the news is that has been on Twitter discussed at the last weekend's G7 talks with world leaders, and also some back and forth between Macron and Bolsonaro. It's because of the Amazon fires have been going on. There are Amazon fires every year, but because I think this is now one of the largest cities in Brazil is being blanketed over with smoke.
Right.
And that is now it's very visual, it's very in their face. It's not somewhere happening kilometers away. It's somewhere that's affecting them personally. Much like how we also talked about fires when we were in, what it was last year, where we even spoke about fires because it affected us here in San Francisco, even though there had been fires in California for previous years. So I think that really it's because of that. It's because the people are confronted with what is going on before them as they are affected.
And the fact that Jair Bolsonaro, right? So he's been largely blamed. It's not, the way this has been discussed is we've actually talked about this guy coming to power in Brazil, and he's a cruel, crooked, bigoted. People call him a fascist, and came to power in Brazil, and they're basically saying that this guy is responsible for the escalation of deforestation that's taking place, and the G7 are using Bolsonaro, who's a easy guy to hate. People should hate him. As a whipping boy for saying, well, the problems in Brazil and the Brazilian Amazon rainforest are because of this guy, and we've got to take him to task. And they threatened to do different kinds of boycotts and sanctions, and there is even talk of when the next United Nations meets for their climate summit that they may put on some sort of regulations and sanctions on them there. Look, neither of us is a friend of Bolsonaro, but I think that's to put this at the feet of Bolsonaro, I think is complete horseshit. And this problem of deforestation has really been one of since the 1970s, and has really escalated since the 1990s, and is a direct product of the debt that these South American countries have found themselves in with the World Bank, IMF, the WTO. And in fact, our last guest here that we had last week, Nathalie, she mentioned where she got radicalized were in these demonstrations of Teamsters and turtles coming together. So what was this stuff about the environment that was happening? It was because people were relating the attacks on the environment directly to the types of cruel things done by the WTO and free trade, and then the World Bank and the IMF using essentially debt traps to imprison African countries and South American countries in a Western debt spiral where they were forced to sell public properties on the cheap and go to export-driven methods, using more of their production towards export than for import, so that people would go hungry. And that's exactly what Brazil is doing here. Brazil is deforesting itself, and this happened not just under Bolsonaro. It happened under Lula. It happened under the people before him. They're basically tearing down the rainforest to export cattle and soy, which are their major, and some sugar. So that's what this is about. This
And
is
beef
about
as
and
well.
beef, cattle,
Yeah.
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 So this is about a process that's been going on for 30 years. That is not like they want to blame Bolsonaro for this, but the people who are the author of the Amazon deforestation, destruction, again, it's the West, and it's the United States. It's people in Europe, and they want to take him to task for something that they know that they've been a part of and responsible for over the last 30 or 40 years. So it's fake news.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel that when the international community comes together and points fingers,
like the G7.
They come together and they're saying things like this. It's very hypocritical when, if you look at a map of 1620, compare it to 1920, you will see vast forests that existed in 1620.
In this
this country, excuse me, in the USA, versus what we have now.
It's the price of development.
Yeah, deforested forests here in the USA, and our own fires here as well that we have.
And the Dust Bowl created in the center of this country by not so good agricultural means.
Practices. The types of practices. Because agriculture has been practiced before, but it's a sort of capitalistic, very fast, short-term practice, not long-term sustainability forms of indigenous wise ways. And I mean indigenous, like lots of cultures throughout the world have practiced different ways of, maybe not calling it rotating crops, but growing food alongside wildlife, or growing where there's natural predators to be able to take care of diseases and pests and such like this. But it really is where the difference that we see here is it's the capitalistic force of short-term, let's get it done, money comes first, we'll take care of the rest, or generations will take care of the rest, and we'll leave it up to them sort of ideology. It's profit-driven is what I'm trying to say. And that's what I just remembered you talking about the Dust Bowl era. And that's the reason why we had that. So we've had examples of what it looked like, and even the Sahara at once had been once forested.
And this double standard of we get to develop our country in whatever way we choose, we get to deforest in whatever way we choose. We deforested areas in the eastern part of our country and in the western part of our country. That's part of development. And the hypocrisy of our country saying, well, we get to do it, but you can't. We get autonomy. We're going to make America great again, but Brazil can't use its resources to try to get itself out of a debt trap that you can't actually escape. I don't know if you know this. I was reading about this. The level of debt of the entire South America is $720 billion, about 38% of the entire GDP produced by South America. Now, do you know how much now people say, oh, well, you're in debt. That's your problem. Do you know how much they've actually paid on that debt from, I think it was 1980s to 1996? Do you know how much of that debt they paid?
You tell us.
$730 billion. So they've actually already paid $730 billion collectively to us
here in the USA.
To Western investors, United States and Europe, possibly China as well, but mostly West. And they have now $720 billion of debt. This is a standard debt trap. This is what you do, and what they've had to do in order to basically pay off the interest of one debt is get a new debt, is get a new loan. This is the World Bank and the IMF. This is how they work. I'll read a quote by Michael Hudson. He wrote an article that I'm going to link to because I thought it's kind of complicated. I find that economic stuff a little complicated.
I do.
And I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on it, but
we have to brush up on that.
Yeah, we're going to maybe touch this later, but whatever. Here's what he wrote. He said, the purpose of military conquest is to take control of foreign economies, to take control of their land and impose tribute. The genius of the World Bank was to recognize that it's not necessary to occupy a country in order to impose tribute or to take over its industry, agriculture, and land. Instead of bullets, it uses financial maneuvering. As long as other countries play an artificial economic game that U.S. diplomacy can control, finance is able to achieve today what used to require bombing and loss of life by soldiers. So this is what the U.S. imperialism has many hands, many games to play here, and it's not just about boots on the ground and soldiers. They've been using institutions like the World Bank and IMF to basically put the thumb to the entire South America, and that's what's happening to Brazil right now. And this is why Bolsonaro, who again, he's a crook, but I have to agree with him that I'm not going to say he's right. I understand what he's saying when he's saying you can't tell us what to do. You can't treat us like a colony. When he says that to Macron. In fact, he claims that Macron is complaining about this, one, to deal with his own lack of popularity in France, which is true, but also to basically try to get a better deal with regards to competing with Brazilian beef exports, because France competes with them. So he's trying to, push Brazil down.
I didn't hear that one.
This was a claim made by Brazilian politicians. They're all right wingers, but frankly, if you ask me who I don't believe any of them. But the biggest crooks in all this are the G7.
Yeah, and again, just to emphasize what you said, it's not Bolsonaro. It was under Lula.
Yeah.
It was even Rousseff. It was.
And before that.
It just, for me, this is where I have a problem with the liberals, because I often think that this is where it's almost as if they're blinded to what liberal politicians do, because they will go hard and say all these things about conservative politicians, but liberal politicians are in it as well, and they're in it making big profits as well, and making money and trades and all kinds of backroom profits. It's just it's an ongoing issue. This is not the first time it's been burning. It's not just burning. It's being burned, and this is actually the last, if I remember, the last largest forest fire in Amazon was in 2010. So I think that if we're going to point fingers because we don't like Bolsonaro, it's true, but really I think we have to look at the system in itself that's driven by capitalism. And this is why I'm an anti-capitalist, because you cannot, and we talked about this as well when we had the episode around climate chaos and the Green New Deal. You just cannot save this planet with capitalist system in place and trying to put in policies that are only going to sort of minimize the impact, but it's not going to be enough. We have to have a radical change, and not just this country, but all over the world. And in order for that to happen, we have to go after the elite class that is making profits of all of this, because they're the ones that, we sometimes blame the smaller countries, but it's or the underdeveloped countries, but it's really the Western and the first world countries that the most developed countries that do ruin this planet because of all the profit making and the comfortability that these countries demand and extract from the resources from other countries. I was going to mention something else as well. I'm exhausted tonight. I'm sorry. I'm a little low energy, but because I didn't sleep very well last night. But and
is everything okay?
Yeah. I just 4 hours sleep.
All right. Yeah.
But he's used to. You sleep 4 hours.
5.
It's a difference. It's a huge difference. It has lots of factors to be in play. This country is very hypocritical, as I was saying. The forest that existed on the East Coast was said that una ardilla, ¿cómo se ardilla? Is like squirrel, could go from Connecticut down to Georgia, down all the way from tree to tree. That was one of the saying how forested, and here we are criticizing, right? And it's the agricultural practice, it's the profit making, it's the non-disrespect toward indigenous rights that exist because people don't speak up, because they're not given a platform to speak up. They do speak up, excuse me, I didn't mean to say they don't speak up. They just are ignored, they're neglected, and they're put to the side. and this is why I think that it's again, we go back, it's all profit making, and I'm repeating about like the Green New Deal and stuff, and that just, to me, is the biggest thing. I was reading an article in The Intercept, and there just really won't be a way for us to be able to make it within the 12-year span, or now 11-year span, that the IPCC was giving us for how we can reverse this, the environmental destruction that we are causing to this planet. I don't know if you agree with IPCC. I'm not even sure if where you stand on that.
Well, first off, I agree with I agree with you about the problem of, if you're concerned about the destruction of the Amazon forest, which, so many pharmaceuticals, I think it was 25% of all our pharmaceuticals have some sort of drug that, or some sort of chemical that comes from that region. Mm-hmm. So many different species. They talk about 20% of our oxygen's produced from that. 25% of our of what is that? The water, that drinkable water, like non-salt water.
Alkaline?
No, but water that you can drink, like fresh water, right? Yeah. Comes from that. So it's a very important part of the planet's biome. All right, mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
and so
they're called like the lungs of the earth.
Yeah, right. And so my biggest problem is the fact that I think they're basically trying to blame this one crook, a small-time crook, for a problem that's really been created by these big-time crooks who've been doing it for decades. Mm. And now they just want to hang it all on him. Like, they know what they've been doing, and now they're going to say, "Oh my God, what are you doing with the Amazon?" It's like, you know what he's doing with the Amazon. You actually have been encouraged these people to do this to the Amazon with your structural adjustment programs and things like that, where you want to essentially privatize state industries and you want to move towards you're imposing neoliberal order on all of South America. That when they imposed their first fascist on Chile and got rid of Allende and put Pinochet there, right? The Western imposed fascists. That really started a whole neoliberal era for the South America that the U.S. has really been using what's called the Chicago model for of economics, like Milton Friedman and stuff like that, to try to reshape the South America into a capitalist wonderland for Western investors to buy up their stuff on the cheap, and still use cheap labor there as well for their for whatever companies that they put there. And if you have a government that threatens to take those those resources back, the CIA goes in and knocks out the leader. And that's how the U.S. has been working. Mm-hmm. So this is not, and this is what they like. This is Honduras, where they do a coup, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like, we're talking 2009, and that's Bill Clinton. Oh, not Bill Clinton. That's Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
I have a question for you, Andy, because for me, one of the things when I see this happening is the policies that exist that may not do, as I was saying, enough, but do something. Not maybe it's just not enough, but to have policies that Donald Trump has rolled back on, like the Endangered Species Act, and as well as Bolsonaro firing his environment, right. some head of the environmental agency
and the space agency that was indicating what was happening,
who was speaking out and saying that there has been more deforestation this year, and then he fired him and essentially gaslit our public by saying that the non-profit NGOs were actually committing arson out in the jungle, and then just also open and Donald Trump as well opening up development for many of our national parks here. Here's my question for you, because you say you don't vote, and you have said here on our program that that those things aren't, like, voting and policies in place are really going to cause a lot. But this is why I vote. Don't those policies and pushing for some policies, don't those at least try to keep and retain some form of protection? Let me finish.
I know.
Retain some form of protection, at least temporarily, until we can push for further, in this case here with you, a revolution, isn't it a way? Otherwise, because it takes time to regrow a forest, and if you don't have some form of protection around the forest, you can cut down trees that have been there for hundreds and thousands of years, and you could essentially, if you're not voting, and when the revolution comes, what, in 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70, 100 years, we won't have anything. You'll start from scratch. If you don't have some, if you don't push for some policies to, this is why I vote. I think that you need to have some temporary protection. And they might get rolled back, but then you push again, and it's this back and forthy, but on the side, you're still trying to create the socialist system that you are trying to create. I think that there's some validity in trying to retain that. I think you can't tell me that you're going to be okay with not, if they're going to say we're going to cut down all of the redwood forests that have lived for 3,000 years, and then all of a sudden some revolution does not come within 100 years and you have no redwood forests available.
Well, first, let me say that
I think this is my problem when I because the next thing I was going to say, but I felt was going to advocate for some policies. But then before I did that, I knew you might say something towards that. And I wanted to just ask you, what is your position? Because maybe I need to be clear before I say the next thing.
All right. Well, first off, I'll go back to your 12-year thing, the 12-year question you had about, like, I know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking about we have 12 years, and it's been put out there. No, I actually
11 years now.
I don't actually. No, I don't actually believe that number. I believe that that's politically driven by the same forces that are about to meet in the UN in September, who are going to try to use what they claim is their concern about the environment to basically force carbon emission caps and taxes and swapping as a way of essentially them getting rich.
I was hoping to go home sleeping early tonight.
I'm just going to say it. But I will tell you something I'm worried about in the next 12 years.
Right, okay.
World war. War with China, war with Russia. That's what I'm worried about. That actually, to me, is the way the environment will be made unfit for humans to live on. Is not from this, what I believe is going to be a slower process by which we destroy the environment. And I do believe capitalism destroys the environment, but largely through the methods that Marx actually laid out when he talked about it in Communist Manifesto. He talked about how capitalism uses the land and just took anything from it. And it did it because the land is a commodity, a free commodity that the people who say they own it, the capitalists, basically it doesn't show up on their profit ledger, so they use it any way they want to in order to maximize profits, because that's how the system works. So, and that's what the fires in California have in common with the fires in Brazil, because the fires in California, the fires in Brazil are planned fires. These are fires planned to basically so you can put cattle there, or raise soy there, or put sugar there, or build a hydroelectric plant, or build a nuclear power plant. These are all the things that are being talked about. Things that actually the U.S. would support and would say part of what Brazil has to do in order to pay back the debt that it owes to the West, which it still owes a debt. Similarly, in California, what are we talking about? We're talking about two things: development in these areas where rich people want to hang out for free, essentially, and PG&E basically trying to do their stuff on the cheap, and things being very dangerous when things get a little hot, and so suddenly stuff gets lit on fire and a bunch of people's houses get destroyed. In both cases, you're talking about people trying to do things on the cheap, and basically wealthy people trying to get over. Now, you say, well, what about these other people I can vote for to try to protect?
I'm not talking about voting.
Well,
if you have some propositions that could put an act there to protect certain species, to protect a certain area of old growth forests, yes,
look,
I agree.
But we're not going to get. I mean, I might look for a proposition. Whatever. Give me the proposition. I'll vote. I've voted on propositions before. I have. I voted on Prop I here to say U.S. out of Iraq. It didn't do anything, but whatever. I voted for it as a statement. I voted against Prop G.
Locally.
I voted against Prop G, which basically was us teachers trying to tax fellow workers to increase our wages. All right, that passed, unfortunately. I voted against that.
Oh, this was recently?
Yeah, this was recently.
That you voted
on. But so if you want to talk about propositions, fine. But let's be clear. That's all window dressing. If the real thing is to understand that we're not going to be able to get these changes at the voting booth altogether, right? And it actually is a problem that people think it can happen, because it's not. It can't happen that way.
I did not say that.
Okay, I'm
said,
not saying,
though, there can be temporary protections.
No, there's no temporary protections. The planet is under a fierce attack by capitalism. There's no shelter here. There is none, unless you take down capitalism. Let's be clear.
But you can put a buffer.
There's no buffer. Capitalism is operating.
A small buffer.
What do you think's happening, right? There's no buffer. What do you think's happening in Brazil? This has started in the 70s, it's escalated in the 90s, and it's getting faster. There is no buffer. And the capitalists will not allow, particularly, we're heading to the next recession, which is something we're going to be talking about in a week or so. Yeah. What do you think's going to happen to all those buffers the minute there's one recession? All those buffers go away. Because everyone says, now we've got to make money again. Now we've got to find ways of recovering profits, because a recession is when profits are hard to find. Then the buffers are gone, immediately gone. They're done. So all those buffers are window dressing to make people feel like something's happening that isn't about destroying our environment or isn't about destroying our lives. And it's an illusion. We're being gaslit and fake news on a deep level. That's what's happening with this.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. Because if it wasn't because of those buffers, we wouldn't have any whales.
Those things
we wouldn't have any whales. We had whales. This is how I was even listening to a program on a podcast. We had whales, so many whales before that you can smell the whale's breath in the city here in San Francisco. You can smell it. There were so many whales that existed. And if it wasn't, and then they started hunting down the whales. They hunted down the bison, buffalo, bison,
yeah.
And they hunted down the wolves. And look, in California, we don't have any more oso pardos, grizzly bears. We don't have any more grizzly bears. And if we had some buffer, we would have at least some protection of some animals. And we're seeing a comeback of some wolves. We're seeing a comeback of some species. So if we don't have at least something resisting just momentarily until we can continue the struggle for a more socialist society, then how can we then say what we have little bit of left?
Right. The fact is that most of those things, I'm not against the struggle. In fact, I support the struggle that produces and forces capitalists to say, okay, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. That's what the Environmental Protection Agency Act, the Clean Water Act, all of those are in relationship to social movements that occurred in the 70s, given to you by Richard Nixon. Nixon didn't do it as a favor. They were a result of struggle. But let's be clear, they were an attempt to appease struggle to keep it from going farther, and to then be able to then go on to further attacks on our water and our environment. That's true with your bison, that's true with your whales. There's been environmental movements, and some of this whale stuff is about trade wars between Japan and China, and the United States even, to try to limit where you can do this stuff in the waters, and to say you don't have the right to do it here. So I will just say that any struggle that produces a regulation, I support the struggle, but the regulation is an attempt to get the struggle to stop, not to expand that struggle. And that's why we can't just let go for those things. I think we can
do both.
Well, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately, because what happens with people and what happens in these struggles is when people set just the goal of getting the regulation but retaining capitalism, if you keep capitalism in place and don't make that struggle about taking down capitalism.
I don't want to keep capitalism in place. I just want to save what we have left.
But then
the trees that exist.
Then you have to get rid of
this capitalist class. If your revolution is not going to come on time, and by then we'll have the 3,000-year-old redwood forest cut down if we don't put these buffers. So I might as well have these redwood trees be protected temporarily until I see the revolution happening. And then that's how I get so upset when you say that, because if we don't have these small wins, that yes, I know it's not.
Can you tell me what these wins are?
We have here in San Francisco itself, in the Bay Area, we have at least the national parks of the redwood forests up north, where we have some land where you're not allowed to develop on it at all because there are environmental protections that are not allowed to.
And you think capitalism is going to keep it that way?
There are also animals, spaces like the elephant seals down south, where Año Nuevo, where you're not allowed to cross and touch and develop there.
But do you think capitalism is going to keep those things that way?
I know it's not.
Of course not. So you have to make it about taking down capitalism.
But you essentially what you're trying to do is you're holding back from everything being destroyed at once. If there weren't these buffers of the people who are struggling in the streets, these things would already have vanished, Andy. And that is
I just said the same thing, Eduardo. I don't know what you see. It's very interesting how you claim to put words and not listen, or I don't do that sort of thing. And I literally just said that these things are given by the struggle that's going on, and I support the struggle. But they are but they try to keep the struggle from going further than what it needs to go. And so all I'm saying is that these half measures, not only are they not enough, they're often there to attempt to stop the movement from expanding and growing, and stop and getting people to settle for keeping capitalism. So no, we can't.
I don't want us to settle, right? But you do agree that these small measures could at least retain some?
No, they can't. You have to get rid of capitalism. They can't. They don't do anything other than hold this thing.
You do both.
Well, it doesn't work that way, because actually
you take care of the whales and you defeat capitalism. Why can't you do both?
It would be nice if Santa Claus existed, but that does not.
No,
how the
it's
world
not.
Works.
It's like my friend Jake, who says when I tell him to recycle, he's like, it doesn't matter to recycle. We have to attack the companies that are making
these.
Exactly
right.
And I'm saying to him, why can't we do both? You can recycle and attack the companies that are producing this stuff in plastic. He said, why does it fall on? I understand what Tia is saying. And Jake, if you're listening to this, I'm just going to say your argument. He's saying that why does it fall on the working class for us to take care of the planet? Why doesn't it fall on the companies that they should be taking care of the way that they produce things for us to consume and for us to buy?
It is going to be up to the only class that is capable of taking care of it.
But he's talking about like individual things. He's like, it's not necessary. Right, you should be attacking the people. And I said, why can't we get after the companies and recycle and be vegetarians to try to save the planet and not support as well capitalist enterprises that are destroying our planet? Why can't we have a high...
You're welcome to be a vegetarian. You are welcome. You're fine. Fine. Put your stuff in the green bin and the blue bin and the brown bin. You are welcome to do that. But you keep saying, Eduardo, I'll join your revolution once it starts.
Where is it?
But that's for some reason you have started. You have every intention of immediately starting to put things in blue bins and brown bins and green bins. But for some reason you hesitate to immediately start on organizing the working class for a revolution.
I want to do both.
Well, apparently you're not, because you seem dedicated to only doing one. The other one you're waiting for. And that's exactly what everyone's doing, Eduardo.
I do agree with that.
No, but everyone's caught in that trap because they're afraid of revolution. They don't believe in revolution. I understand that. People, it's understandable people don't believe, but there is no alternative. Let's be clear about this. The rainforest is not the U.S. property. It is Brazil. I'm going to talk about in capitalist terms. The rainforest we have no right to tell Brazil how to use a rainforest. Under capitalism, that's their shit. That's Brazil's stuff. They get to use it in any way they want, just like we can frack all we want. We can use our environment any way we want. That's the rules of capitalism. Capitalism basically says any country within gets to use their stuff to build materials, and they can export it any way they want. They can sell it any way they want. That's the rules. Those are the rules of capitalism. So let's be clear. Any attempt to tell Brazil what to do with their rainforest is basically capitalism. It's imperialism. It's fake capitalism. Because the real rules of capitalism are we get to use any resources we want so we can make our country as successful as we can using export-driven, profit-driven motive. That's the logic of capitalism. So there is no way to save the Amazon under capitalism because capitalism drives the Brazilian capitalists to use that thing as best they can to keep themselves alive under conditions of reduced profits, which is what our next recession will be. And then there'll be another boom, and there'll be another recession. That is the life cycle of capitalism. All right. So if you want to stay alive in doing that, you better use the resources any way you want. So here's how the clock is ticking on us. The clock is not ticking on us around global warming. That is not the clock that's ticking. The clock is ticking on us on organizing ourselves as a class in whatever place we can to basically build strikes, becoming mass strikes, and taking down our government and ending the profit system. That is the only thing that will get that. And unless you set your goal to that, just that goal, everything else it won't work. Everything else is just window dressing. And so,
Yeah. Ah, it's not the window dressing.
Unfortunately, it's not taking on the act. It's not us as the working class, because Jake is wrong about one thing. It is the working class responsibility but that is the only class capable of actually treating the planet like a place that we actually live. Because that's not how we treat the planet. We can't treat the planet like the place we live. We have to treat the planet like a commodity to be exploited for profit. That is the rule. The only way we get a chance of treating the planet like the place, like our home, is if we have a socialist revolution and we eliminate the profit system through that socialist revolution, and we build a society based on human need. Now, once we do that, that means that we as workers have to figure out how to do that, right? That doesn't answer the question, but it at least eliminates the profit motive, which forces everyone to essentially treat everything like a commodity and use it up as best they can, all right? So Jake is wrong about the fact that it's not the working class's responsibility. It is our responsibility. And the only way we will be able to become responsible for doing that is we've got to get the capitalists out of here. And we have to build the dictatorship of the proletariat, a workers' state that will then lead to the possibility of an international workers' state that lead to eventually classless society called communism.
I think you mean something else, that it is the responsibility of the working class to do something, that is to organize.
No, I mean, I'm saying one of our responsibilities that create an imperative for the working class to organize to make a revolution is our responsibility to make it possible for us to live on this planet in terms of a sustainable kind of living. That will not happen under capitalism. So capitalism has to go. What class is capable of making that happen? It won't be farmers that are going to be able to do it. It won't be peasants. It won't be the middle class. Under Marx, for us Marxists, there's only one class capable of making that happen, is the working class. And we have a choice. We either make that revolution, or it's what Marx calls the common ruin of contending classes. That is, in the clash between the contending classes of the capitalists and the working class, if we don't win that struggle, then the whole thing goes kaput. And you can see the ends of civilizations. We have seen civilizations that don't grow and grow and grow. Some civilizations get wiped off the face of history, and that's why it's talked. I mean, Nathalie didn't think it was social. She disputed that notion of socialism or barbarism. We are not at barbarism right now. Barbarism is literally.
Well, what do you mean expand on that? Because you're talking about something she had said, and I think we don't want to confuse the audience.
Okay, well, I had raised this quote that Engels had made about we have a choice. The working class has a choice: socialism or barbarism. And I think barbarism isn't here right now. Of course, capitalism is barbaric, but what he meant by barbarism was literally a situation where you can't have socialism because so much has been destroyed, so much of either the working class has been eroded, or our environment has been eroded, or through war or whatever. It's impossible to actually sustain ourselves. We can't produce enough food. We don't have enough water. Whatever. Those things are actual living realities today when we talk about the nuclear war, when we talk about, well, that's the big one for me, is war, is the one that is really pressing. That we can see Iran being the hair trigger for something that could completely get out of control. And before you know it, two major nuclear powers are exchanging weapons, are exchanging salvos. And then it's over. I mean, not over for the earth, but it is over for the possibility of socialism, and then we're living like feudal people, trying to like that movie The Road, where people are eating people and stuff, and it's just a degrading existence. People could be alive, but there's no chance for that kind of sustainable living that masses of workers could do if we were allowed to collectively run society as we already do, but all the things we produce collectively are essentially taken by the capitalists and collected privately and then used for profit, and then for re-putting in money back into investment and things like that. So we're not able to choose what we do with the things we make.
All right. Well, it's good to clarify for here's let's see, because you said a lot. So I don't think that. Well, we had just different strategies, I suppose, how we would go about something, and I guess I understand it. If you don't go against the gangsters that are ruling this, are in place in government, then it's not a fire that's going to cause the destruction of our planet. It's going to be a war. Yes.
And this process that we're seeing is happening in Brazil will continue. The Amazon forest will continue to be depleted. It has to.
Yeah.
Because the capitalism has to use it like that way.
Yes, and I respect and I so appreciate as well the struggle of people that have really resisted for more rapid destruction of other things like species, like our protected lands now, that I think that we need to as well appreciate that struggle that has been in place and will continue, such as the environmentalists today that are being murdered, Berta Cáceres in Honduras and other indigenous folk. Down south there was a mother that, she was a mother, she was trying to protect some parts of indigenous lands. And the struggle here in Standing Rock as well. So I feel as if I don't want to discount them.
No.
I think that is the reason why we can do both. That is how I believe it, right? But I do agree with you that people can settle with less, and that is the fear that I hear in what you're saying. What I wanted to touch base on one of the things that you said is that this is very, very concerning. What is happening not just in Brazil, it's concerning what's happening all over the world. I haven't even touched on what I was going to say earlier, which is Siberia, which a large part of the size of Belgium is burning a forest that we're not thinking of. And the forest fires here in California, and the fires that are existing and even Alaska, I was hearing, not just grand scale, but I mean, we're having even microbeads within the Arctic and snow that has been discovered under a microscope. So there's a lot going on, and I think that we do have to organize to transform our society. And I welcome everyone that is really interested in trying to do something about the planet. Capitalism is just not the way, and I've said that in our Green New Deal episode. So here I'm just finding common ground with you, where I do agree with you, and I hope that we can wake up and really do something and not go to the extent that you're calling barbarism, because that would definitely kill us as a species and destroy everything.
It's not, and I'm not dismissing the struggle. Those struggles are like that. Those are necessary. But again, I'll go back to Nathalie's story. She was organizing with anarchists who were anti-capitalist, revolutionaries, consider themselves revolutionaries. And they were they were building protests, they were taking on the cops, things like that. Then the 9/11 Twin Towers come down, 9/11 hits. What happened to that movement? And suddenly everyone's Osama bin Laden. But if that movement around WTO, World Bank, and IMF, which had other weaknesses, isn't also clear that Osama bin Laden is not our enemy, that Taliban is not our enemy, but George Bush is your enemy, Dick Cheney is your enemy, that movement has to be clear on that question, along with other. Because if you're not clear on that question, your movement is going down. You have to know who your opponent really is, because they will fool you every time. I'll give you another chance. Another inspirational movement, the 1%, 99%, right? The Occupy. Okay. Well, let me ask that 99%. Did they mean immigrants who were coming across our borders? Were they part of the 99%? Believe it or not, most of them weren't talking about that. They did not think that the 99%, which should mean people coming across our border legally or illegally, were part of that. No, they don't think that way. They were thinking, here in the United States.
It wasn't the rhetoric, but there were some.
No. I mean, it wasn't a movement for open borders.
At least here in San Francisco, I worked with some working groups. I remember there was
But I'm just saying,
some discussion of open borders.
But I'm just, by and large, the movement
Yes.
was able to get knocked off. And secondly, able to get knocked off the thing with the idea of Barack Obama and what have you.
Yeah.
Right.
The
So clear about
confidence in Barack Obama.
Right, the role about the Democratic Party. If you aren't clear about who your opponent is and what you're fighting for, you're going to get knocked off the track. And so that's what I mean. It's to say, if you really want to stop these things, if you want to stop what's happening in Standing Rock, if you want to stop what's happening in Brazil, if you want to stop these fires in California that are a result of, again, development and the basically cheap practices of PG&E trying to do this development on the cheap, then you have to become dedicated to fighting capitalism. And if you want to become dedicated to fighting capitalism, then you better understand that workers in Afghanistan, ISIS is more your friend than Hillary Clinton. And I think most people are like, what? Well, get used to that. There are more friends you have over there in ISIS than you do with Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. Sorry, that's the rule. Because workers over there who are trying to fight for their lives, right, with using ideology I don't even believe in, have more understanding about who their real opponent is because they're shooting at them.
You don't believe in their ideology.
I don't believe in their ideology, but I believe that they're fighting the right fight of their own self-determination. And that is something that we have to fight for and support and fight for.
Not support ISIS.
Basically say they have the right to shoot anybody who's coming into their country and they're trying to claim that. Yes. If you want, you can call that what you want. I will say I support their struggle.
We don't support ISIS.
You can say for your say I support their struggle. So and again, they're going to get you on that. They trust me. They're going to use terrorism, fear of terrorism, to cause you to spin your little mind and get confused about who your enemy is and who your friend is. So yes, Bernie Sanders is not my friend. Elizabeth Warren is not my friend. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not my friend. They're all trying to fool me. The people over there who are shooting at U.S. soldiers, those are the people who are on my side trying to take down this government. We don't believe the same idea. Those aren't socialists over there. Yeah, they're Islamists. They have their own set of beliefs. But they have the right to fight against my country, which is occupying their country and trying to kick them out.
So let me just be clear. So you admire people fighting for their country, but you don't agree with ISIS ideology.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's for the record. So we're going to be aware. I'm sure you're on some list, and I'm wondering why I'm having trouble traveling.
Well, I thought we lived in this free country where we can get all the haircuts we want. But apparently I can't say I support ISIS.
You support people, not ISIS, but people,
fighting
groups.
To liberate their country.
You support the idea of fighting and liberating for your country, and you're not talking about specific groups. You're talking about people in general.
Right.
Okay, good.
So it's
on the record.
I'm so glad to live in this very free country that I can have all the haircuts I want, but I better be damn careful what I say. I love that freedom.
Okay. We're just trying to protect ourselves.
He is.
I'm trying to protect Andy, even though he.
No, you're right. But again, this is the freedom we live in. On Facebook, I put a post around this IMF stuff to say what hypocrisy there was, and I put fascist in the post.
Yeah.
And the thing wouldn't even go up. They wouldn't let me put it up there. I had to actually remove fascist and put F*****ist.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
This is your. Okay, we can get our haircuts, but look at the freedom we got.
You're referencing for our listeners who did not listen to last week's episode.
When
I mentioned that there were 17
haircuts.
Some haircuts in North Korea that people are supposed to have.
And about how much freedom we have here compared to North Korea and that cruel Kim Jong-un.
So we're not in support of ISIS. All right, it's clear on the record. Let's carry on.
I want the U.S. to lose a war in the Middle East where they shouldn't be there. They should come home.
Yeah, I agree.
So anybody who's trying to defeat the U.S. over there is doing the right thing.
Yeah, well, I'll say what I'm going to say. We shouldn't be meddling in other people's countries, everywhere, right. Not just in the Middle East, in Asia, in in Africa, in South America, wherever. There, general. Let's carry on. I was going to say something. The next thing, which this distracted me by, was then I know your position on it, but the just for our liberal friends, you don't necessarily agree in individual changes like becoming a vegetarian or not going to specific places that contribute or that company contributes to the deforestation.
Not as a strategy for changing the world. Make you feel better? Sure. I do things to make myself feel better. I play video games. I
don't think video games and trying to
not
support
it's not
boycotting certain companies.
It's not a strategy for changing the world and making those problems, actually solving those problems. So in that regard, yeah, I don't mean to. I'm just saying, like, it's fine if it makes you feel better. It makes you feel better, but don't confuse it as a strategy for actually solving the problem.
Even though one of the factors that has contributed to environmental destruction is agriculture.
Yeah. I mean, but we're not going to get to control that unless we have a working class revolution. We will not be able to control how we do agriculture, because again, the land is just a commodity under capitalism. So it's going to be used in whatever way the capitalists see fit, particularly under conditions when right now we are having a so-called boom. We're going to have a recession, and then it's going to be again. The capitalists will have to do anything they can to try to recover profits. Get rid of regulations that are currently existing. Mm-hmm. We're already seeing those sorts of things happening in Europe. So the pressure to eliminate regulations, to eliminate the ability for the capitalists to use the land in whatever way they see fit, that will only be expanded when we have our next downturn. So, and then if we get through that, and if we don't have a war, economic downturn,
the recession,
yeah. I mean, because that's how it works. We have there's an economic crisis, and then of profits, and then there's got to be a destruction of capital to some extent, and then a recovery of profit as a result of that destruction of capital, and that's the process that capitalism lives on. It sort of breathes in and breathes out. So.
And when people think of agriculture, when I think that people people try to think of as, well, how is it that agriculture, I've heard even this said, how is it that agriculture contributes to environmental destruction? The way that I was mentioning earlier, the way that we practice agriculture is unsustainable when you simply concentrate a certain crop and you're trying to deplete a certain land for 2-3 years just to try to get the profits of that crop. And that is what is happening in the Amazon, where you have what is called in forestry slash and burn. Mm-hmm. And that is to clear a forest and to burn the rest of whatever remains, stumps and what scraggly trees exist, and then try to use those ashes of that fire to be able to fertilize the soil that will only be giving you profits for 2-3 years of that time, and then you carry on. And that is not just a Brazilian agricultural practice, that is here, like we were saying, in the Dust Bowl era, a US American form of agricultural practice. So I just want to remind folks that it's not so much that it's just, we should just change our diets, we should change the way that we farm on the planet. I think that I'm not a big supporter of meat, really, I'm not. But I do think that there are forms of raising livestock that is sustainable. And the way that we do it, where we have these factory farms where we concentrate 3,000 cows in one single area, is just not the way that nature meant it for it to be. And I do think that cows and domestic livestock have been part of human civilization for a very long time, and these things did not happen under that time, right? The concentration of having these animals locked up or corralled in a certain place, and their feces and the methane that they produce all coming at one area. I think that if you had what the Aztecs had, or what the Europeans had, indigenous folks, that it would be dispersed areas of places where these gases for the methane or the consumption of grazing would happen at low impact levels that actually were in an alignment with what natural areas they lived in. So I think that my criticism around vegetarianism, as a vegetarian, because this is a very liberal talking point, this is why I'm talking about it, isn't so much that it's everyone should come vegetarian, which I do think that would be a solution as of right now in the way that we do it, but I don't think it's actually going to happen. So that's why I don't have a lot of hope in this solution. But if everyone, yeah, but it's not the one that I think that is that we can bank on, because it's not the lessening of meat, it's the practice of how we consume meat and consume our crops. And soy, for many vegetarians who drink soy milk, is actually another contributor in the Amazon. So it's not just beef, it's also soy and corn, the way that it's produced. And the root of it all, capitalism, profit making of all of these things. So I just wanted to just touch on that talking point that liberals bring up a lot on vegetarianism, which is valid if you're talking about the form of systems of agriculture that we have. But that's what we have to stay away from, I think, organically and holistically away from, and away from the profit-driven agriculture practice that we have currently. I just wanted to take that. Yes, Mia, Andy. I'm just distracted by your comments. I don't want to say the words.
I was going to say some more here, but I'll leave it alone.
No, you should.
I'll just say that you mentioned the indigenous people. There's a belief that up to 1 million indigenous people are being displaced or could be displaced by, they live in the Amazon, and they're being risked being displaced and having their entire ways of living destroyed and uprooted. And again, another casualty of our system. It's not necessary. Like I said, I think it is unnecessary. I do actually believe the working class collectively could figure out alternatives to it. I do believe that if we don't have a revolution, you do get to a situation it's ironic. I mean, I don't believe under capitalism, if everyone became a vegetarian, and the way that would have to happen is that would have to be imposed. Remember, that's what that would have to be. Yeah. That still wouldn't solve it, folks. You could have everyone become a vegetarian under capitalism, and our agriculture and the environment that is being destroyed and biodiversity being removed would still be destroyed because of the profit motive. So unless you get rid of the profit motive, there is no escape. And the only way we could even do that solution, which wasn't a solution, is the way that Kim Jong-un controls his country, which is tell people what to do. And that is what capitalism leads us down, which is the belief that these non-solutions are solutions by dictators telling us that we can't have certain haircuts or we can't eat meat.
Yeah.
And neither one works. We have to liberate ourselves. And liberation means freeing ourselves, but it's going to mean struggle, and it's going to mean armed struggle. It's going to mean taking down systems and replacing them with new systems. And those new systems aren't just going to be like, here comes magical things. We're going to have to figure out democratically how to run our regions. And that is a challenge. But that challenge can only be made if we actually get capitalism off the stage.
And I know what the topic for a future episode might be, because you're talking about Kim Jong-un facing and implementing certain irregularities, and Juul, a company that makes e-cigarettes, has now been banned. E-cigarettes, and I know you have a problem with taxation and prohibitions, and so nanny, as some people say, nanny policies. Yeah. And I think that we should get into a discussion about that. I thought maybe we should talk about that.
Want to have another fun conversation?
Yeah. Because we've been meaning to have it when we discussed about
That's true. That is a kind of a good one for that, for these kind of taxation things and regulations. And yeah.
Anyhow, I think that we have stated our points. I was saying that I foresee, if we were to have a crystal ball here, that we will have another catastrophe. It's just more than likely because of what is happening with the fires. And like I said, this is not the only fire. There are fires even in Siberia that are happening. And it's very, very sad what's happening. And what is going to be happening I wanted to mention this, and I asked you to write something down. I just wanted to point out a little fact here, is that here is a fun fact that I think people will see how the Amazon is very crucial and important for the people who live in South America. Northern Africa is And South America is actually hotter than Northern Africa, where you have Saharas and you have deserts. But because of the rainforest and because of the evapotranspiration that happens, which is all the condensation, the rain, the water, the forest, the ecosystem that happens, like so that humid. Allows it to be to control the temperature there. It's not as hot as Northern Africa because it maintains that temperature very well adjusted to the necessity of the ecosystem that is happening there. No, so imagine that being just cut down, which already we have 12 football, U.S. American football fields a day being cut down. I think that is what will look like in years from now. So I was just mentioning to Andy that I got that fact coming here after reading and on the bus and the National Geographic, and I'm just disheartened when I see not just the Amazon as well as here the fires, but the difference is that the fires here in California are actually quite a part of the natural system here, as we had discussed last time. Do you remember that redwood forests actually need some form of fire, and
to thin themselves out so they don't have huger conflagrations?
Yes, and then native U.S. Indigenous people would actually do some of these fires so that they can try to maintain some of that brush.
Right.
But in Amazon, that's not part of their natural ecosystem, and it's getting drier because of the agricultural practices.
Although it's important to understand that the statistics that came out of this industry that Bolsonaro was trying to get rid of, the INPE, which is really the Brazilian space program. Those are the initials for them.
Yeah.
They have basically said this year is no drier, no hotter than any normal year. So the destruction that's really happening is not a result of a warming process or anything like that. It's just humans doing their thing because they're trying to make money, and it's not just humans; it's corporations.
They didn't say that part, but
if you read the World Bank, if you really read the World Economic Forum, the primary reason that these things are being destroyed is not a result of climate change or anything like that. It's due to human activity, and it's completely stoppable.
Yeah.
But the space is. Let me see if I can find the quote. The IMPE also produced data showing that this year is not particularly dry or hot when compared to previous years, or other mass wildfires in the Amazon, pointing indirectly to the impact of the current administration's anti-environmental policies. So it's these things that are happening are the results of human activity, and the human activity pushed by a system which makes us do inhuman things.
Which I would encourage our listeners and viewers to go to an episode on climate.
Yeah, we talked about
climate. What was it? Climate change.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was.
Well, it was on the.
I'll put it.
Yeah, you'll put it on the description below, because I think that what I think you're slightly trying to reference to it, that it isn't so much about carbon dioxide contributing to the greenhouse and destruction of the environment. I think you're talking about that it's about focusing on man-made, profit-driven destruction of the environment,
and redeveloping the land to make it so that land development that makes it impossible, like that rips up places where crops could be grown or trees can be grown and things like that, and that kind of stuff I do think is real and is happening, and it's the way capitalism is destroying the environment much more directly than what I think is the notion that it's carbon dioxide emissions that are directly connected to the change in that is the way humans are changing the temperature on this planet.
Yeah, which if I had the energy, I would counter argue with, but I'm not.
I'm just saying I question it, but I can't say.
Visit the episode.
Yeah. I'm on my back foot on that one, but I question it.
Which you were a staunch supporter of before.
Yeah, before I just kind of accepted that, of course, that's what's happening, and then as I looked into more of these liberal scientists, some of them here in San Francisco, what they were saying, that started to make some sense. And particularly as I've seen how the major powers are using climate change, the Paris agreements, Copenhagen agreements, to exercise control on the smaller countries and force things down their throats. It makes me very suspicious of these people who I know have no interest in protecting the environment, using environmental conferences to impose their imperialistic policies.
Check the episode out. Yeah. I won't argue right now.
We're
going. I want to go home and sleep.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for this.
Oh, but we have to know so that we've had a set change, right?
I think our listeners, if they want to, they can see it. We don't have a lot of
viewers. We have our new chairs that come.
Wall Street Journal chairs.
Wall Street
Hollywood
Journal.
Wall Street Journal chairs.
This was the person who, roommate or what have you, lives here. They donated these Wall Street chairs, and so we're sitting in Wall Street chairs talking about how we're going to take down capitalism.
Perfect. Ay, Dios mío, the paradox. All right. I was just going to wrap up. Yes, all right. I'm exhausted. If anyone cannot tell from this episode, I am completely wiped out. I have woken up every morning at 5 a.m. this week, and I prepared for this and actually didn't need to prepare because this is a fascinating topic that I actually have been very invested in before because I worked with... I partnered with a nonprofit before, an Amazon NGO before. So I truly like this, but I'm very wiped out today.
Do you have some ideas for next week that we're going to do?
I could be... we were discussing on the phone. Opioids. I was thinking vaccines or / measles, because we talked on it 2 weeks ago. And we could talk about reparations. We could talk about economic...
What do you think about the China trade war, tariffs, things like that? Are you interested in that one?
I mean, I think that we can do it. And if anyone else wants to suggest something in the comments below, they were more than welcome to say something about it. Yeah.
And I think the thing you mentioned about what are those damn cigarette things?
E-cigarettes.
E-cigarettes, yeah. My friend Mitch, he likes those.
They're very flavorful, aren't they? I haven't had one.
Yeah. Keep your hands off Mitch's e-cigarettes. Let him smoke if he wants.
Oh, God. Which the adolescents are trying to... They're actually being targeted, so I will say something about that then.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up. Thank you, and please check us out on our 5 platforms on iTunes Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Bitchute, and YouTube. Rate, review, subscribe, and best of all, share with your community and friends. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
I'm Eduardo Barca with Andy Lipson.
Bye.
Ciao.